Welcome to the American Academy of Grief Counseling's Videogram on anger in grief. And in this video, we're going to discuss the process of anger and how it plays out in grief itself. If you remember Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's grief theory, she does list anger as one of the initial emotions after denial that erupts when loss or death or bad news occurs in itself. Now, what we want to emphasize is that anger is very natural of an emotion to losing something. It's not something that necessarily should be shunned or held in. The only time it becomes negative is when it is misused, when it is channeled improperly. So anger in itself is healthy, but it needs to be channeled in a healthy way. Examples of channeling anger in a healthy way is especially when there is a loss due to a injustice, a social injustice, where the community comes together and expresses its discontent over what occurred. Recently, the George Floyd murder is an excellent example of loss and anger at a communal level coming together in a conducive way to produce change in society, namely in policing and so forth. So anger is an important aspect in grief. It needs to be expressed, and sometimes it is essential, especially in social situations, that it is expressed. However, anger cannot become wrath. It cannot become misused to the point where destruction occurs or riots occur, or to the point where in your individual life, harm comes to others or yourself due to that anger. So it's a double-edged sword in some ways. It's important, but it has to be utilized correctly. For many, anger is a defense mechanism. Whenever a loss occurs subconsciously, some individuals exhibit what we call defense mechanisms when a situation is uncomfortable or there's a conflict, or maybe if there's internal thoughts or emotions that are detrimental to themselves, something they're not ready to accept. So various defense mechanisms seep into individuals who are trying to deal with the particular loss. One type of defense mechanism is displacement. And What's Your Grief, a site that I have spoken of before, also has a very good article on displacement of grief as a defense mechanism. Displacement, though, allows the individual in the moment to avoid maybe anger in the proper direction it should be going over the incident, and instead it displaces the anger towards something else or a different person. So instead of facing the anger properly, the anger you're feeling, and applying it to where it needs to go, you're not ready yet to take it there. And because you're not ready to take it there, that anger is going to be displaced into different directions. And this is something that counselors deal with on a daily basis. Some examples of displacement include anger towards God and faith or worldview. So when individuals lose something or something bad occurs, they tend to question their faith. They tend to question their worldviews that they held, their philosophy. And sometimes that turns out into cursing God, being angry at God. And this is why it's important for chaplains and ministers, when they approach someone, not to take it offense that someone is cursing God or angry at God. Yeah, you would like not to see it, but this person is expressing their grief this way. Your job is to allow the anger to be expressed and to guide it elsewhere, to manipulate it into the proper channels where it should be, not to condemn or to judge it, so to speak. Anger towards other people occurs quite a bit, towards the bearer of bad news. This is why individuals don't like giving bad news maybe to their boss or so forth, because they're afraid that they're going to receive the brunt of the emotional response. Towards those lower in hierarchy, a boss might become angry and take it out on his staff later in the day. Or sometimes we feel more comfortable, some individuals, being angry and taking it out on those that are closest to them, because they know that they're always going to be there for you. And so you feel you can get away with a few words here and there when you're angry. And usually that's the case, although words can sting and we need to watch. But, a lot of times individuals feel more comfortable just letting loose, exploding about something that's really bad in front of those that they're more comfortable with. Anger can also be towards objects, destruction of valued objects, statues and so forth, random destruction, riots. And these are all misplaced and also very dangerous events and very criminal events, obviously. Also, anger towards the establishment itself. If it's not done in a physical way, it can be a very conducive way to start reform, as we mentioned earlier. However, facing the loss is critical for the particular individual. We can't constantly displace our anger towards other things or people or towards a deity. We have to eventually face the loss and ask, why is there anger? And usually after the emotional outbursts end, when the feelings subside, we're able to better question, why are we angry? And does it involve certain things? Does it involve the way the person died? Did the person die via suicide or driving drunk or some socially stigmatic way? Many individuals are angry at someone who drove drunk. He knew not to drive drunk, they will say. Why did he drive drunk? He knew better. I am so angry and upset that this person is no longer alive because they drove drunk. Does it involve an injustice? Again, George Floyd is a very good example. The anger that you might feel towards the police and those particular officers. We have to make sure that we understand the anger is directed towards the right individuals and maybe not the police themselves, but corrupt officers and so forth. Does it involve an unresolved issue that you have with the deceased? Maybe you were arguing over something big that was about to happen, or they did something you did not like in the past, and you were never able to resolve that while alive. And now you're feeling this residual anger after the fact that it was never able to be resolved while that person was alive. Does it involve guilt that you might have? How you treated the individual while they're alive and you feel guilt and anger? Or is there resentment towards how the individual treated you before they died? And you're living with maybe abuse or something like that. So you need to get to the root. You need to face why you're angry about the loss and to not displace that anger towards others, but to apply it towards whom it is, the deceased individual usually, and to talk about it, to get it off your chest with a counselor, to discuss it, so that it makes more sense. And by discussing it, you can also dismiss maybe false ideas you have that really aren't your fault, that you never would have discovered unless you actually discussed it with sort of a magical thinking, something children go through, that if it isn't corrected, then you continue to think this fallacy and it continues to haunt you. So facing the loss, facing the emotion, why is there emotion, are all critical parts to coming around and finding a healthy resolution to the loss. For those of us who deal with the grieving, who are angry and are faced with this type of displaced rage, never take it personal, and don't engage with anger back. Don't try to philosophize. Don't try to discuss theological matters. Well, you can't talk this way about God. You have to understand this and that and so forth. There's no time for that type of discussion. And there's no type to get angry back and go, how dare you say that to me? I'm here to help you. These are not the ways to handle the grieving. And if you're an individual that cannot take that, well, then maybe this isn't the field for you. You need to be able to take the anger of others when you're trying to help them and channel that anger in a productive way to help them heal. And be open for apologies later, because they will eventually apologize and say, you know what, it wasn't your fault. If you're a family member, it wasn't your fault. I'm sorry that I acted this way. I'm just going through so much. Be open for those apologies. Don't make it difficult for someone to apologize over that. Matter of fact, you can even say you don't even need to apologize. I know it's helping you, but you know what? I wasn't offended. I understood. These are the ways that we handle displaced rage and how we handle anger in grief. And that is critical in grief counseling because anger is such a prominent emotion that goes with grief. If you'd like to learn more, we are the American Academy of Grief Counseling. We offer a grief counseling certification, which is a 4-year certification that you can earn after completing 4 online independent study courses. Our phone number is 330-652-7776, and our email is info@aihcp.org. Again, remember, as counselors, individuals are going to be angry when they grieve, and it's our job to help that anger manifest, but to be manifested in a healthy way that leads to healing. I'd like to thank you for listening today, and have a good day.